All right, welcome to another episode of Ex-Vicarious. I'm Braith, and today I'm joined by Angus McGlynn. He founded a wellness brand with 7 stockists at 14 years old before the COVID restrictions caused his markets to shut down. Angus started becoming interested in design and soon started freelancing and doing UX design for HowToo, EBPearls, and INFIX Creative Studio. Shout out Neve there, who's a past guest of the show. The first mobile app he designed and shipped was for the New South Wales Government, which he did when he was 16. He then completed a Startmate fellowship before founding his own design agency, Refract, at only 18 years old. Amongst all this, Angus left high school during year 10 to pursue a diploma of graphic design instead of the HSC, dropped out of his bachelor design at UNSW for a full-time design job, and has now been directly accepted into a master's of design due to his work experience. Alright, so I spent a lot of sleepless nights thinking, how do I become the best version of myself and leave my mark on the world? To answer this, I decided to ask exceptional people who have or are on the journey of doing just that. When you have big dreams, it's easy to just fantasize about them and live vicariously through your idols. But that's not how I want to live. So if you feel the same way, this podcast will show you how to make your dreams look more like goals by showing you how founders, creators, and game changers did it. You'll learn about their habits, mindsets, and strategies so you can stop dreaming and start dream making. I'm Braith, and this is Ex-Vicarious. So there's so much to unpack, but Angus, thanks for coming on today. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Just before we get to the questions, I just wanted to ask, is there anything you wanted to add on?
No, I'm keen to
No?
can you just get stuck into it?
All right. So just wanted to dive into Medelo, that wellness brand that you founded at 14 years old. So how did it come about?
Yeah, so initially, I think most kind of kids at that age are trying to know that starting to spend a bit more money. They're wanting to find a job, yeah, to just buy more things. And I initially got my first job. I was about 12 years old, working at Priceline at the chemist. I It was good for a little bit, but I ended up really not liking it. They put me on stacking medicine, and I was at that point in time, I was just so bad at figuring out where everything goes, and I had a pretty bad experience. And I
Mm.
thought, oh, I kind of familiar with the markets, and it sounded quite interesting just having my own kind of business at that point and just making my own thing and just going and selling it. I thought, oh, it might be worth a crack from a very high level perspective. But yeah, like that was where Medelo started initially. And then I ended up getting very obsessed with it as opposed to being in school. I was just spending the whole time just, yeah, trying to build that up and go there on the weekends. And yeah.
Yeah, just at 12 years old, you said that job with Priceline. What actually made you want to get a job just being so young back then?
Oh, I think I've always been really independent. And
Right.
I think a big part of getting that job was like that first bit of independence. So I think I really hated asking my parents to buy me stuff. I always wanted to go out with my friends, and I wanted it to be, it was like everything was me. I was doing it. It was my kind of thing. And so that's what led me to go and get that job at the very beginning.
Mm.
Yeah, like I think I was just so independent growing up. That would just seem to be the natural kind of track for me.
So even before 12 years old, can you think of any examples where there were things you did out of the norm because of you wanting to be independent? Like it could be unrelated to money, but are there
Mm.
any other things that come to mind where you always felt like you were doing something very differently because you just wanted that independence?
Yeah, I think all throughout, even just primary school, like I've never been super into school, and I think that independence more came after that like first kind of 12 years old. But yeah, like during primary school and high school, I was always like even just to make a point doing my own thing, and that would be
Yeah.
like drawing all over like my books and stuff, or not listening to the teacher and whatever. It was like rebellious kind of independence. And
Okay, I see.
I think like for me it was like channeling that into more constructive kind of thing. So yeah, that was Medelo. That was like finding that job when I was quite young and stuff like that.
What kind of gave you the perspective to channel it into something more constructive? Because I know that for me personally, I get what you mean. Sometimes there were those when you're younger, you just want to rebel for the sake of it, even.
Mm,
And a lot of people will continue going down that path where they do want to rebel or whatever, but don't figure out a way to put it into something constructive that you did mention. So, how do you think you came to the perspective to actually do that in the first place? And what helped you
yeah.
do it?
Yeah, I think a big part of that was definitely my parents played a big role.
Right.
Like they were always pushing me to spend my energy on more constructive things. I did get in quite a lot of trouble all throughout high school, but I was always doing something outside of that. Like I always had my business, or I was like teaching myself like psychology or
Right.
something on the side, like after school. And so I think they always knew that I had that. I was interested and curious about kind of the world and like what like I believed in myself, but during kind of school and stuff, it didn't come out in the best way. And so it
Mm.
was just like, yeah, I guess it was definitely my parents channeling that energy and like helping me and supporting me in those outside activities. Yeah, I think that was really big for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. And in terms
Yeah.
of psychology, you mentioned, teaching yourself psychology. Were there any things you learnt at that time that really stood out to you, really surprised you once you learnt it? Especially if you looked at
Mm,
your own environment, the people around you,
yeah.
or looking into yourself
No.
that you're like, this
Yeah.
clicks.
Usually, I think psychology. I think the main thing which really interests me, I think empathy
Right.
has been like learning, not learning empathy, but like understanding it. And because I think it applies so much to even now like design, like it's such an empathetic field. And I think I'm quite lucky that I had an interest in it as I was growing up,
Mm.
and I like was teaching myself because I think when I went and moved into more of a like kind of design education and like design roles, that initial foundation that I built, it was not nothing like intense, but I remember just staying up all night, just teaching myself like psychology, or like 6 months, and then another 6 months would be like English or
Mm.
something like that. Like it was like, and I guess it came into my ADHD. Like I was very hyper focused
Mm.
on things that would interest me, and then but nothing else would interest me outside of that.
Right.
And
Okay.
so I think that has very much helped me in a way gradually grow.
Yeah. I wanted to come back to the ADHD helping you become hyper focused in long periods of time. But in terms
Mm,
of when you mentioned learning about empathy as part of psychology and being able to put that into design, were there any
mm.
projects you can think of where that really helped you?
Oh yeah, like every most projects have been very much like that. Like I think my very first app at 16 was this one for New South Wales Government, and that was a child protection app.
Right.
And so it was for refugee families that they would lose their children as they were coming over, and so there were all these troubles and problems with like language barriers, and
Mm.
like a lot of them, it's the first time they've ever used like a phone and like all this kind of stuff. And so I think that requires like quite a deep level of empathy to really put
Right.
yourself in their shoes and understand what the problem is, not just from a design perspective, but also the kind of impact. Yeah, I think that situations like that has really helped me. I think it's helped me grow like quite quickly through design.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
cool. For that project at 16, how did that actually come about?
Oh, that was part of my old agency, EBPearls. So I was working there,
Yeah.
worked there for about a year and a half while I started that while I was just finishing my diploma, which
Yeah.
is like just insane that I managed to get that job. But yeah, that's where I spent a lot of my time growing. Yeah, like in the design context.
So, in general, with all of those earlier roles, were you actively applying to a lot of different agencies? Or because I noticed sometimes, yeah, one of the ones, it's like people actually reach out to you as well when you put more
Mm,
of your work out there. So, yeah, just throughout those experiences, all those roles that you got so early on, how did they come
mm.
about?
Oh, I would say they were all, yeah, like referrals. Like initially it was, yeah, I didn't think I had enough experience
Hmm.
to get these jobs, but I guess like someone like people at uni kind of would see that they really liked my work and they
Yeah.
thought I had some potential. And so a lot of them just like gave me a chance. Like I'd have a week to prove myself in these jobs, and then like, yeah, they all ended up going quite well. And I ended up getting that kind of full-time position. But
Yeah.
yeah, I was very lucky to be given that opportunity because, yeah, like I know a lot of people aren't. Yeah.
So, when you say they liked your work, was it work that you did as part of uni related courses, or
Yeah.
Or was there any work outside of that just for fun as well, part of your
Yeah,
portfolio?
like since I dropped out at 16, I was like every single second of my life was just design. It was this is my chance to go well, or and if
Mm,
I don't, then there's really no other option for me. And so it was great in a way that I just could not screw it up. Like it was every single hour, it was like whole days spent either working on my like course or doing like passion projects after that.
right.
And yeah, and I think it was also just like going to events every single day. It was just like pushing myself as much as I could, which was really, really brilliant. But it's also, yeah, also very scary at that age. But yeah, I think it's exactly what I needed.
Where do you think you got the confidence for going to those sort of events when you were very young?
I don't think like when I started, I definitely wasn't confident by any means. Like it was, I just knew I had to push myself and
Yeah.
just show up and put myself in those situations. And I always knew that I would get better at it. And so, yeah, it was just like, yeah, like it was just starting. And just, I think it's so important to just put yourself in the situation no matter what and let yourself grow because otherwise you're never going to get better at it.
Yeah. And if you remember, could we go back to let's say, the very first event that you
Yeah.
were able to push yourself to go to? What sort of things were you telling yourself, or what sort of things did you do in order to make sure you're going to turn up to that event no matter what, like that
Mm.
very first time?
Yeah, for me, it was like just talk to one person,
Right.
and that's all that you need to do. Just show up and just talk to one person and make one connection there,
Mm,
and that's all. It's all I need to do for the whole kind of night. And then the next event would be like, okay, talk to two people, and
right.
then next one would be talk to three people, and then after that, then those people you start to see again, and you start to make those connections, and it gets easier and easier. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was just like gradually letting yourself hit points which are like hit these small goals which are accessible and
Mm.
then growing it from that little point, I think was really important for me.
Yeah, I love that. Would you say that you've applied that sort of mindset every time you've faced new challenges or new
Yeah.
things that you're not too confident about?
Yeah, hugely. Hugely. I think
Yeah.
that's been a really core aspect of like my career so far has just been those incremental changes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really cool, especially a big part of why I do this podcast is show people they can take that next step. And as you said there, like by reducing it to just having to talk to one person on your very first go, yeah, it makes it so frictionless for that first step to
Yeah.
be taken. So I absolutely love that. I wanted to go back to where you mentioned that when you were learning things for periods at a time, like psychology and then English, you were hyper focused on that and didn't really want to learn other stuff. You just wanted to fully focus on that, right? So, what would you say the process looked like when you were teaching yourself things out of your pure interest versus when you were trying to learn at school? Because I noticed that you said at
Mm.
school you struggled to focus, but when you're learning yourself, you were hyper focused. So, what was the process like in terms of the
Mm.
differences between the two?
Yeah, like I think how do I put it? I think high school was it was great like for the kind of friends and the social aspect of it. I think during that I really loved just talking to everyone there. And I guess I was quite distracted. And so I
Yeah.
think the environment was like it's always good, like everyone's giving it a go and learning. But for me it was I was always really interested in the people.
Yeah.
And I found yeah, like it was very hard to focus. And I also like a lot of the kind of teachers it was never once they find out that you've got like ADHD or something like that, you get this special treatment, which for me at that point I really didn't need. Like I just wanted
Mm.
to fit in. And so for me it was like, yeah, I just thought, hey, I'm not going that well at school. I need to yeah, learn outside of that. And nothing really interested me in the way that yeah, these other more specific subjects did, which I found yeah, which was really important.
Yeah. So, with
Yeah.
these specific subjects, what sort of things were you doing to learn? Were you watching certain videos or reading books?
Yeah.
How did it come about?
Yeah, so I used to just go straight to the bookstore and just buy three or four different books on a subject and
Yeah.
gradually go through all of that. Or like yeah, straight when I got home, like 3:30, 4 o'clock, it was straight onto like even Coursera and Udemy and like
Right.
all these kind of online learning platforms. Yeah, it was just straight, just obsessive with it. It was like either like video games was a lot of my kind of mates' things, but
Mm.
this like learning this was just mentally very stimulating for me. Like school was just like it was almost quite slow in a way, and
Yeah.
it's a larger class, and so it's harder to go at your own rate. And so for me, I needed to be going at a specific speed. Yeah, yeah.
So I noticed you mentioned that once teachers found out you had ADHD, they were treating you differently, and
Mm,
that's something that wasn't making it very enjoyable for you
yeah.
at school. For other people with ADHD, what sort of advice would you give them if they're in a similar position? Obviously, like you, they may have a lot of things that they're interested in, want to
Mm.
pursue, but school is just not really working out for them. What sort of advice would you give them?
I think I'd probably say that they shouldn't let it phase them in a way. I think being a lot of people view ADHD as such a weakness, and they almost make excuses for that's a bad way to put it, but I don't think they should let ADHD guide them. They should just
Right.
I like accept it's there, but then also
Mm.
utilize its advantages, which is yeah, if you're interested in something, then you can really just focus on it, which like for business or any other kind of aspects of your life which you want to really focus on, like it's a massive advantage. And
Yeah,
so for me, like starting Refract, it's been I've just easily been able to just completely put 100% of my focus on it and
yeah,
just grow it, which has been it's grown an insane amount in just like the past 2 months. And so I'd say use its advantages, but don't let people tell you your weaknesses in a way. Accept it's there, but also don't put all your energy into thinking, oh, I've got ADHD. I can't do this thing now. Like, I think it is such an underrated kind of thing when you accept it and then make advantage of these like other kind of yeah, like hyper focusing and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah. So in terms of Refract that you mentioned, and how you've able to grow it so much so
Mm,
quickly, what would you say your main focus with Refract is on a day-to-day or
mm,
weekly basis? Because obviously there is all the elements of design that you want to be doing for people, but now that it is a business as well.
mm,
So how would you say you should split up your time between focusing on it as a business versus what your offering actually is with Refract itself?
mm, mm. I think the hardest thing for me has been balancing the delivery and that business side of it. And so
Yeah.
for me, it's like been allocating enough hours for each single task and breaking everything down like as
Mm.
small as possible. And so that's yeah, like I think a big problem with doing business and then also design at the same time is the context switching. So you really need
Yeah.
to allocate like blocks to each single task. And I think for Refract, like the business side has really been getting these relationships going. So like I think design as a industry is so centered around, yeah, as I said before, empathy and relationships. And when
Mm.
you start to go above a certain price range for your projects, it's all inbound. And so to get
Right.
those inbound leads, like it's your brand is one thing and like how you position yourself, but it's also relationship building and yeah, putting yourself out there and reaching out to everyone in LinkedIn and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Like it's all very much like you've got to provide a lot of value before you can ask for stuff, which has
Yeah.
been kind of our center. And it's also been like how we've been able to get some of these larger clients, which we have so far. Yeah.
Yeah. And I definitely want to go into those larger clients
Yeah.
later on. But just to start off with Refract, could you go into the story of how you started the company?
Mm.
What sort of things would you say that you knew beforehand, and after starting it, what have you actually learned?
Yeah, I think my initial kind of reasoning for starting, I've always wanted to start like a design agency or something along those lines. And
Yeah.
I think it was just, okay, at what point do I break away and give it a go? I think the whole
Mm.
time, my whole kind of career up until now, I've been in very close with seeing how an agency works and okay, like how do they get their clients? How do they communicate with their clients? What's the system there? And I've always had in my head, oh, I probably do that just a little bit differently, or I do this a bit differently.
Right.
And that's built up, and now I feel like I've got enough of that knowledge to know what I should be doing and like what I kind of should do in my own way. And for me, it's just like I'm at this point now. I think I can. For me, it was like taking that risk and going all in on it. And I thought, just recently I was very like positioned to finally give it a go, and I thought I had enough experience to really provide a lot of value. That like that was how Refract kind of started.
Yeah, and you mentioned when you realized certain ways design agencies operate, there
Mm,
were aspects that you thought, okay, maybe I could do this differently.
mm,
So, what would you say as a whole, or maybe just as an example, what is something that you've really tried to make unique about the way either that you run Refract or about your offering?
yeah, I think for Refract, our whole thing is we're a partnership to your business. So I think a lot of agencies out there, especially the ones that work with startups, there's such a bad kind of rep for these agencies now. Like they either don't understand the product, or you're working through a million project managers, or it's so convoluted, and there's all these really kind of massive systems which don't fully, they do need to be there to an extent, but they're also like there's just so much kind of friction. And so the big thing with the Refract was like, okay, how can we make this so high touch and so streamlined and so easy for the clients to really feel like we're a part of their team? And so
Mm,
that's the model in a way. So a lot of agencies say, oh, we're a subscription agency, or we're like a traditional agency. But yeah, for us, it's like, okay, we're a partnership kind of model. We're like your design partner, which is our position that we're taking. Is we want to see you through the whole kind of from my initial idea all the way through to like massive funding rounds and going to
yeah.
become like $1 billion is like the goal. And yeah, that's like the model so far. And I think that's also what feels best for me, and also if you're a whole team. It's just like remaining authentic and really high amounts of communication, and that's Refract.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, how many people are in the team at the moment?
Yeah, so we've got about three. We've got one. I've got one colleague who's full time at the moment, and
Yeah.
he's a strategist and copywriter. He's actually from INFIX as well. And
Okay.
then we've probably got like 20 other freelancers and contractors ready to go, and a few people that have been identified to come on full time as we like continue to grow. So yeah,
Yeah.
we've got one part time person who's doing like marketing and the social media aspect for us and for our clients, and then this strategy copywriting position, which is just goes so well with design. And
Mm,
yeah, that's been the initial kind of thought process. And we've actually got a creative director coming on.
nice.
He's got
Yeah.
30 years of experience coming on in the next few weeks as well, which is like really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
cool. I wanted to ask about just what's the process been like building that team,
Mm,
especially as you mentioned, the creative director having 30 years of experience and
mm,
yourself being potentially younger than other members of the team. How have you gone about building that team and what sort of learnings have you had just
mm.
from taking it away from just yourself doing everything to actually having all these people with you?
Yeah, I think it's been really hard to start delegating the work. I think I'm not going to say like my way is always the best way, but
Mm,
I found like giving up that kind of ownership is a big thing. At least for me, it's been like something I've been having to get through. And I think it's also coming from you could like freelancing, like just doing it yourself. And then you think, okay, to actually grow this, I need to start letting other people take charge. And they're all better than me at their own different things. And so I think
mm,
giving that space and also that like transparency to have that kind of back and forth with them is really important. Like that's been one thing. I think for bringing people on, I think like everyone can be great technically, but you also need to be really, really good at actually like working with the clients and also like working within the team with each other. And so
yeah.
I never thought of it when I was working as an employee was like, okay, how does everyone communicate with like the team? And because it's so important and it really has such an impact. And so it's like the next few hires will be, okay, you have to be good technically, but also like work well with everyone. And that was never anything that I thought of before I started. And I guess it's a bit of
Right.
a leadership thing. Yeah, which is interesting. And yeah, everyone's like way older, but I guess that's kind of part of it at the moment.
Yeah. Do you think
Yeah.
leadership is something that you've always been interested in being able to do? Or was it just by starting this company, realizing that you needed more team members,
Mm,
people to delegate to, then you've just taken it aboard?
mm. I think I've always wanted to like be in more of a leadership role. I've always wanted to get to that level in the company or even in high school, like be like, if I had stayed, be the school captain or something like
Mm,
that. That was always a goal of mine. It was never something I really chased though. I think it's had to come quite naturally. But I also like accept like I have so much to learn in that area that yeah, it's an exciting like new kind of thing that I've been exploring like at the moment. Was like, okay, how can I be the best kind of leader as we bring on more people and everything gets more complex, and how do I like yeah like navigate like people having disagreements and stuff like that. Yeah, I think every agency owner wants to have an agency where everyone loves to work at, and I
mm.
think that's something that you proactively have to kind of chase and aspire to be at. So yeah, that's like very much at the beginning of that kind of journey at the moment.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
awesome. I wanted to take a bit of a right turn and kind of an open ended question, but what does design mean to you?
Oh, I think design is just listening to people, and I think it's yeah, I think it's empathy. Like I think
Yeah,
design comes in so many forms now. I think designers view themselves as, oh, I'm a graphic designer or I'm a product designer or an industrial designer, but
yeah,
I think there's a base kind of level there where it's not the tools or it's not the tools or the medium that it's on. It's okay, how the way you solve the problem and the act of like understanding who you're designing for. I think
right,
that's like what makes the designer, and that's what makes them a good designer as well. It's like understanding not just like the technical, oh, I know Figma or anything like that. It's actually, okay, how do I craft this thing or put it out into the world in like a way which will really resonate and will ultimately work the best in whatever context that is. And so, yeah, like design is an act of empathy, and it's an act of listening, and it's also an act of deconstructing in a way like all the kind of whatever brief it is or whatever the problem is. It's like, okay, how can I solve this? Yeah, that's what design is to me. But then yeah, like I think a lot of designers out there really box themselves in to different areas, which like it makes sense. But I think now there's such a need for more of a kind of generalist designer, which is like very controversial, I think, from that kind of standpoint. But I
right.
think now with all these tools and like even AI, I think there's such a need for these generalist designers which can really get in early and just build out everything. I think is that's where I'm thinking it's going to go. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So, do you see yourself as a generalist designer?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I
And
think
which,
oh, yeah.
oh, yeah, sorry, you keep going.
Yeah, no, I think I'm definitely more of a generalist. I think I've had such a great amount of experience in different areas that almost always like applying something, like I'm doing like the branding, and then we can move on to like the app or the website and stuff like that. I've always tried to keep my experience at the same level across the board, which yeah, I think it's pretty important.
So, I know you mentioned you keep your experience same level, but which were there any specific areas of design where it felt like when you first gave it a go, it just clicked and you picked it
Mm,
up very quickly? Or it could be the same or could be different. Which area would you say is your favorite, just out of
mm.
personal interest?
I think product. I love like designing apps and web apps, and I think they've got the largest, so generally the most broad kind of problem that you're solving
Mm,
for. It's also generally the most complex and in depth as well. I think yeah, like there's nothing better than just like, being in the flow and like just designing like a massive kind of app for some random startup idea. And I
yeah,
think that's for me been the most kind of fulfilling part of design, which I really enjoy. I also think just like the logical aspect, like there's so much design out there which is like aesthetically is there's so much importance, but I think
mm,
with product as well, there's like the actual logical side to it, which is I think is really exciting when it meshes with the aesthetics and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the topic of product design and how you enjoy making apps,
Mm.
do you like every time you've approached it, do you have a set of tools that you stick to, or do you always try to use new tools, especially you mentioned before with all these AI capabilities? Are you
Mm.
always trying to figure out different ways to create an app, for example, or are there certain things that you just stick to and that you
Mm.
are really efficient with?
I think Vim is my bread and butter, but yeah, I've always been trying new tools for all aspects of design, whether it's like prototyping, even like these new animation tools like Rive and Jitter. I think have been
Right.
really cool. But yeah, I think I'm of the perspective that it doesn't really matter what platform you're designing it on. Like at the end of the day, it's just like how it is translated. Like you see these designers, like these really experienced designers, they've got like 20, 30 years experience and they're horrible at Figma, but no one would say that they're a bad designer because they're
Mm,
just so dialed in on their craft and
right.
how the end product looks that it's not, yeah, there's, you can't, yeah, it doesn't make them a bad designer at the end of the day.
Yeah. So would you say just for people who are interested in design, any types of design, when they're
Mm.
trying to get into it, that they really don't need to worry about getting really good at a certain tool. And it's just really worrying about what they want to produce as an output.
Mm.
And that will actually get them there rather than worrying about, oh, I have to learn, for example, Adobe or whatever.
Yeah, I think like to an extent, I think it's you need to know the tool to like a baseline where like you can think it and you can draw the wires of it, and then you can translate it like exactly to what you want. Like I think you
Yeah.
get to that level where it's not dragging you down in a way as your technical ability. But I think
Yeah.
once you're at that point, you're probably better off like focusing on getting inspiration like from like other areas and working on the actual like the discipline, which to me is yeah like listening to listening to the kind of users or something like that. I
Yeah.
think that's what will make you a better designer ultimately.
So when you're trying to learn new tools to get to that certain baseline,
Mm.
what do you think has helped you make that process really quick?
Yeah, for me, I've always had really great senior designers, which for me, when I was like starting at 16, was I would just attach myself to them and just really just ask every single question you can think of. But yeah, like I think YouTube is such an underrated place to learn, but also just like giving yourself a problem and just testing everything out and just like exploring the software, I think is so underrated. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's you can gain knowledge from any area. It's just how you apply it ultimately at the end of the day.
Are there any YouTube channels that come to mind that people who are wanting to get into design you reckon they should check out?
Ooh, I'd probably say Instagram is. I've been yeah, I think Calypso Design on Instagram has got quite a lot of
Right.
really good tips and advice. But yeah, there's so many.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Calypso. I put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Again, wanted to take another right turn and just
Mm.
ask, who do you think has been the biggest influence on you for the path you're on today?
Mm, I think my parents have my grandma. Like my grandma she owns quite a large art gallery in Sydney, and
Right.
so I think my whole family's always been quite entrepreneurial. They've all like my grandma dropped out at 16 as well, and to
Yeah.
study like
That's so
art,
cool.
and she was like this the 60s, and
Yeah.
so I think we've always had that kind of in our blood in a way, and so I think yeah, that's probably been where I've taken the most inspiration is to be like okay, like it's been done before, and now I just need to execute and see how far I can go myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you first dropped out, what were the sort of conversations that you had with your grandma?
Oh, I think not so much conversations, but just having that validation in a way of things. I think that they're relatively successful now. It was just, okay, yeah, like it's been done and like they've all turned out fine. And so I knew that I would figure it out myself. But yeah, I think like, yeah, high school was just, I was getting suspended. I was getting in trouble all the time. Like, I think, yeah, at that point, it was just like, I'm just gonna go out and give this my best shot. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, and in terms of being in school and having a very going a different way to which everyone else
Mm,
is, right? How would you say that their reactions to you potentially, like for example, dropping out, whether it was in school or uni, how's that outside noise? Has it ever affected you? And yeah, how have you just
yeah.
been able to choose basically the path that you wanted, even though it's been very different to what your peers would be choosing?
Yeah, it was definitely really a big adjustment. I think like when I dropped out in year 10, it was like I had such a massive friend group, all these
Mm,
connections through high school that I ended up moving down to Sydney from Bowral, which is only an
right.
hour away, but at that age, like I didn't have a car or anything like that. It was hard to keep that communication going. And I think as you go, yeah, there's such a like what you even relate to. Like for me, I was spending every day just like talking to these founders and stuff that were like 30, 35, and that was normal for me eventually. And when I would go
Yeah.
back and hang out with all these people, it was I just didn't know how to communicate. And
Yeah.
that was part of my reasoning to even go back to UNSW and start that degree. It was like I didn't really need the degree per se. I didn't need the,
Mm,
the learning from that, but my main goal was like, okay, to go reconnect with people my age, which I ended up doing. And so then that made me feel a lot better about dropping it to go, yeah, but no one, I don't think anyone like warns you about how much of a impact that does have. Like, yeah, like most of my friends now are like 5 or 6 years older than me, which I think
yeah.
just that's just how it goes, I think.
Yeah, naturally, because whatever you're doing is more similar to people 5 or 6 years older as well. So
Yeah,
then they're the people that you're going to be coming across more often
yeah,
as well.
absolutely. Absolutely.
In terms of moving down to Sydney by yourself, yeah, can you just describe that process? What went into that decision,
Mm.
and how you got settled once you came over to Sydney?
Yeah, I ended up moving down when I got my first, when I went full time at that agency.
Right.
And yeah, like it was definitely quite a big shift. Like it was the first time I was like cooking for myself, doing all this kind of this commute each day. Like it was pretty
Yeah.
nuts. And yeah, but it ended up, it was pretty easy and straightforward. And I think the main kind of thought process was like, okay, yeah, obviously working full time, but also just I really wanted to go branch out and make these connections in kind of design in the industry. So like a lot of it was to be able to go to these events each week and make these it's like friends now. Yeah, that was a big part of the kind of thought process. And yeah,
Mm.
like it just seemed really natural.
Yeah, and in terms of maintaining these relationships now, obviously not just through business, but your whole career
Mm.
learning all about design and learning about the industry, I'd imagine that your schedule would be really packed every day. So, what do you think has helped you balance being able to keep making all these new relationships for the business, but also maintaining a lot of your own personal ones?
Yeah, yeah. I think honestly, I couldn't say I'm brilliant at it to an extent, especially now with the business. Like, it has definitely been hard to maintain friendships like outside of my like straight circle, I would say.
Right.
And I'd probably warn anyone starting a business that it takes up everything. And
Hmm.
you know, I think when you're younger, you have the advantage that's like pretty okay to an extent. It's okay to really give something. You're all like you don't. I'm very lucky I don't have like other massive commitments at the moment. But I think yeah, just always giving yourself time to see your mates and hang out with people like even back from school and stuff like that's so invaluable, and you should never really take it for granted. And I do think it is something that you have to continuously. You can't be comfortable thinking that like you're going to be able to maintain this friendship forever. And so I think it's always important
Hmm.
to give it that time. Yeah, which I've always done. Like being able to just like one weekend, some like here and there, just making that time I think is so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously, with running a business, you said you've been hyper focused on growing it as well.
Mm,
So, a lot of the time, your mind will always be about different things you can do with Refract, new opportunities with it,
yeah.
ma- like managing certain things that current ongoing projects. What would you say has helped you sometimes take a step back and be present when you're outside of Refract?
Oh, I don't know. I think I've just been completely like I leave my phone at home. Like a lot of the time when I go
Right.
out now, it's
Yeah.
I just don't bring it with me.
Yeah.
And so that's been good. for me at the moment, or just like completely just shutting it off or putting it in my bag, because I'm an absolute addict when it comes to LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's been really big, like just being able to switch everything off, which is so much easier said than done, I think. Yeah, and just like actively making an effort to be present as well, and not
Yeah.
like switching off and thinking about like some project that's coming up or like anything like that, I think has been big.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Like keeping your phone at home. I've never tried that
Yeah.
one, but that is, yeah, for sure. I
Has to
can.
get pretty grim to do that. But yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to some of those bigger partnerships that
Mm.
you've gotten now through Refract with Fishburners, Startmate. So how did those come about?
Yeah, honestly, I just messaged, I think personal branding and building a LinkedIn, even if you're in a career, it's so important. I think everyone should be aiming to make these connections, like whether that's on,
Mm,
yeah, whether it's on LinkedIn or it's like going to events. Like I was so lucky that I made that a focus while I was working and studying. I already
right,
had a, like not massive, but like a decent sized network when I like went in on Refract. I don't think,
right,
if I didn't take that time, I don't think we would be like anywhere near where we are now. I think, yeah, an agency now in like 2024, it's 70 or 80% personal branding. Yeah,
yeah,
like even you probably know me from INFIX, it's so personal brand
yeah,
heavy, which it makes sense. I think it's like people that they want to see authenticity. Yeah, like that's just, it's like so important. And so for me, it was like, yeah, I already had these kind of connections. And so it was like just a matter of reaching out and seeing where you can provide value, maybe doing like a designer audit on someone's website or offering something for free to an extent. It's like just showing them what you can do in a very frictionless way. And then they're like, oh, that's pretty good. And then you can start like a proper conversation and you can get, it can turn into something really exciting. I would recommend that to anyone starting an agency. It's to just offer as much value for free as you can. Like it sounds so unscalable, but when you're starting from zero case studies or zero kind of projects under your belt, like it's so big. Yeah, just do anything you can to get those initial ones.
yeah.
Yeah.
And what would you say is one of the biggest projects that you've actually done for free early on in your career?
Ooh, we're potentially doing this project with this company in the US, and
Right. Okay.
it's we're charging them only for development. And this company is like over $1 billion, and it's like
Wow.
massive. The website's awful, and but it's huge. And so like in return they'll, yeah, that's going to be a big one. And so we're doing it now. Yeah, like hopefully we'll see that come up in a bit. But yeah,
Yeah. Okay, that would be
that'll
awesome.
be,
Very keen for that one.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, in terms of your schedule, how would you describe your own
Mm,
work schedule now that you have your own business? And because I know you mentioned the time blocking as well before.
mm.
So, yeah, just wanted to get a little bit of an idea of how you work.
Yeah, like for me, I think it's really important to identify when you're the most productive. So I am focusing now on like putting all my meetings on one day each week, letting these little kind of distractions get in the way of like deep work. Because for me, like I feel like it takes a bit to fully dial in on something and focus all your energy. And once you're in that kind of state, you don't want to just easily be broken out of it. And so for me, it's,
Mm,
yeah, like clumping all of those little tasks together in a few hours, maybe each day or one big day during the week. I think that's really big. Because yeah, like when the agency is so dependent on that delivery aspect early on from like the owner, you need to give yourself that time. And yeah, like identifying when you are the most productive, it just means if an hour in the morning is the most productive time, that's worth 2 hours compared to the afternoon. And so for me, it's just been like identifying that and building my schedule around that. But yeah, like for me, yeah, also just staying healthy and like going to the gym
mm,
and eating well and stuff has been like massive for actually like client deliverables and like even
yeah.
booking meetings and being like like happy on the phone and chatting and stuff, like you really do need to take care of yourself, which
Yeah.
has been big for me starting this, when it's just like an endless amount of energy you can put into it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I can see that. In terms of finding out when you're most
Mm.
productive, what sort of things did you do to figure out that?
Yeah, I think I would say like time yourself. So that's what I've been doing a bit, is timing. Like if I'm doing like one landing page for a website, I'll do spend 4 hour blocks on it and see, okay, like
Right.
this 4 hour block, I got this much work done. And compared to another time, another day, you can't measure it specifically down to the absolute second, but seeing how much work you get done in that amount of time, and then also like just really reflecting each day on everything you've actually completed. That's really massive. I think it's just like, yeah, it's, you just need to measure absolutely every aspect of your business, and you as
Yeah.
well, what you're doing, how much time you're spending on it. Is it productive? Like there's,
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think I've tried doing similar things as
yeah.
well, just timing myself and also using that time as a countdown as well
Mm,
to make sure I do get it
yeah.
done quicker as well.
Yeah.
Because I know, like, when you think about tests and you're given a time limit, you naturally just work so much
Mm,
faster. So I think I've tried to take that
yeah,
into
that's
all
huge.
aspects of any sort of
Yeah.
work as
Yeah.
well, which has been, yeah, pretty
Yeah, that's been
helpful
like,
in that
yeah,
way.
I tell clients I'll have something through to them in an hour or 2 hours, and then it's completely, okay, I have to have this done in 60
Yeah.
minutes. Like, that's setting those pressures on when you
Mm,
need stuff done, like internally, or even like with the
yeah.
client as well, even if it's due like in a few days, just like, all right, I'll have this through to you by like tomorrow. And
Yeah.
making sure you complete it. There's no other option. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done very similar stuff as well with just like with the blog or interview.
Yeah.
If I'm saying I'm going to send this to you, then that, yeah, putting that pressure on
Yeah.
yourself is
Yeah.
super helpful. Can you think of any examples where you gave yourself one of those like really tight timelines and you actually mentioned to a client, for example, I'm going to get this to you then,
Mm.
and you basically accomplished way more than you usually would or you expected you would? Are there any examples that came to mind?
I think, yeah, I think a big part of it is getting yourself in that flow. And so I had one client like a week or two ago where I was just going to have 1 or 2 pages done to send through to them, but I ended up like pretty much completing the whole website in like that, like 8 hours of time. And it was like, it
Wow.
was good
Yeah.
kind of quality as well. I think it, yeah, it's really surprising what you can do with like when you really focus and like just completely like, yeah, like get in the flow of things. I think it's really big.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I've really been applying that, like setting that deadline with yourself and with the client, and making, holding yourself accountable. Like it's actually been like
Yeah.
a massive part of like our productivity, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really cool. But looking long term, how do you think it? Do you think there are any drawbacks long term where it could cause burnout,
Mm,
or do you structure in a way where you're only giving yourself so many sets of this timed pressure, heavy pressure
mm,
work, and also scheduling in ways to really take a step back and relax
yeah.
intermixed in
Yeah.
between it? How do you go about that in a more long term?
Yeah, like for me, it's been okay. I give myself those deadlines to get it complete, so I don't spend like a huge amount of time like eating into like the nighttime, like after dinner and stuff like that. I always try and keep that
Mm,
kind of to myself, and that's almost like what those deadlines are for during like day. And
yeah,
so if I can keep those going, generally giving myself that time to relax is, yeah, like I always have that there instead of like lingering on something and procrastinating it, and then ending up like, yeah, like working way later than I should. And I think you have to expect that to an extent, is that you are going to be in that kind of burnout risk zone like a lot of the time. But yeah, I think just putting those things, like it might be like a run or the gym or like a sauna, something like that. Like it's so important. To just, yeah, it's
yeah,
almost like identifying when you're most productive, and then figuring out, okay, what increases my recovery the most? What activities is it? And so optimizing that to an extent is really important as well. Yeah.
yeah. I just realized we're running really short on
Oh
time. Do you need a like
no,
off, by the way?
I should be. Yeah, I'm all good.
Yeah. How much time do you have?
Probably,
Because I'm happy to.
probably about 15 minutes. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good.
so
All right. Yeah. There was just heaps I wanted to ask. Potentially, like having a part two as well, if you're down
yeah,
for
no,
that.
absolutely.
Yeah. But I'll get to ones that I wanted to make sure I ask every
Yeah.
guest. And the first one was, what's the earliest dream you remember having that has stayed with you to this day?
Oh, I think the one that stayed with me to this day was starting that business. And so starting Medelo was really like the beginning of kind of everything to me in terms of running my own thing and also that independence. And so that's probably been the most profound thing which has stayed with me. But even before that, like I remember in like year 6, I used to take the little those party poppers that you would like shoot out confetti. I used to take
Yeah.
out the
Yeah.
confetti inside them. I'd buy a pack for 250, and I would take the confetti out from inside of them, and then it would make them like sound like gunshots. And so I used
All
to
right.
go and
Yeah.
sell these like little party poppers to all the year 10 students in
Yeah.
high school, and I'd sell like one for $1. And I bought a whole pack of 25
Yeah.
for $1.50, and I was just completely just like
Wow.
creaming
Yeah.
it. I guess that was like, yeah, like I've always wanted to. I don't know, something about having something which is yours and starting a business. I think it's like definitely the most exciting thing for me. That's
Yeah. No,
yeah,
that's
and
so
so I think
creative.
like that kind of that energy has always stayed with me, and I think it always will. Yeah,
I wanted to actually ask, going back to when I asked you what design meant to you,
mm,
and for you, the main thing is empathy, right?
yeah.
But how do you see yourself more as a creative person or an analytical person?
Mm, I don't know. I would say I'm creative to an extent, but I wouldn't say I'm the most creative out there. Like
Right.
I definitely am, but I think what makes a good designer, and I'm not just talking about me, but I think what makes a good designer is a person that is creative but is also like analytical and logical. And I
Mm.
think there's an aspect of that in everything. And if you don't have that, then you're more of an artist, which is completely, that's great. But I think for design, there's always like, you're not just designing the people, you're also designing for like the business. And
Mm.
you always have that in the back of your mind. And so I think, yeah, what makes a good designer is definitely a mix of the two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you feel like you're quite balanced
I
too.
would say, yeah, definitely. And I think
Yeah.
that's, yeah, definitely in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, that
Mm.
makes a lot of sense. What was most fulfilling when you first created Medelo and you first felt like, okay, yes, this is my own
Yeah.
business, my own thing. And of course, you were going around selling all across Sydney and Greater Sydney. So, yeah, what would you say was the most fulfilling aspect of it?
I think for me, it was just like kind of the people that you talk to, like putting yourself out there. And for me, I think
Mm.
there's something so nice in making something from scratch and like that kind of, yeah, like 0 to 1 in a way, like putting something that was just not on earth and then making, just building. I think that a lot of people do love that as well. I think making something from scratch and starting something which is yours, I think is definitely my what I enjoyed the most of it. And I think I really like that aspect of it because like it's almost, it can get massive, and there's almost like this optimist kind of outlook that you have when you're starting a business is, okay, how big can I get this? And it's
Yeah.
almost that dream in a way. And so I think that is working on something which doesn't have a ceiling is
Mm.
such a massive motivator. And I think there's a lot of enjoyment from that because it's just, you put this amount of time in and you can get this much back. I think it's quite cool as a concept.
Yeah. Working on something that doesn't have a ceiling. I loved how you put that because I think I resonate with that as well a lot. Anything I do want it to be, as you said, something that doesn't have a ceiling, something that
Mm,
you can take further than anything that has been taken in a
yeah,
way.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, that definitely contributes to making it so exciting. In terms of your first sale with Medelo versus landing your first client at Refract, how would you describe the difference between those feelings or maybe the similarities?
I'd say the feeling was very similar, like
Okay.
a completely different area and, yeah, scenario, but
Yeah.
yeah, like very similar, I would say. And my first time at Medelo, Like, it was literally at Paddington Market. We had like a stall set up, and I opened my mouth to sell. Someone came up, like the first customer ever, and I opened my mouth to sell, to explain the product, and I just could not say anything. Like, I just opened my mouth and no words came out.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, like that was, to be honest, with Refract, it was almost the same. It was like this whole sales thing. It's such a kind of, what's the word, intimidating thing in a
Mm,
way. It's like
yeah.
selling a product, and but I've learned now that it's okay. It's a relationship, and you're selling like an outcome. You're
Mm,
not just selling like something for the money. It's also, there's so much more to it, and you're just helping them with their problem. And so for me, that's how I've approached it. And I think a lot of people should approach that with sales. Like, it's not an art of being like too aggressive or like anything like that. It's just, okay, just having that conversation and seeing if you're a good fit. Yeah.
yeah. On the topic of those relationships, for the
Mm.
listeners, what should they know about Refract and how could you help them?
Yeah. How do I put Refract? Refract, I think if you're a startup or any business and you're sick of working with larger agencies and you want to work with someone which feels like a freelancer, but it's more of an ongoing relationship and you get access to a whole kind of team, I'd say definitely check out Refract and see if we're a good fit. We're all about the partnership model and really listening and being there throughout your whole journey. And yeah, check out the website, refract.studio.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. In terms of Refract, what would you say leading into next year? Let's say to the end of this year or 1 year ahead. What's your main goal with it?
main goal, I think we just want to continue doing what we're doing and yeah, see how big we can get. And so I'm
Right.
going to San Francisco for 2 months from January, and we're approaching a few larger US kind of companies to work in the startup kind of scene as well as Sydney. And so I think the goal for us is like, okay, become massive in San Francisco and Sydney, and just
Mm,
see, like, I want people to think, okay, we need a designer, we need to work with a team, and I just want them to think of Refract. That's the goal, I think, and I haven't really put too much thought outside of that. But yeah, I think that's where we're at the moment. It's just like this massive compounding kind of growth phase, which is really exciting.
yeah. Yeah. That's really exciting, especially the trip next year. Now, I wanted to ask you if you had to live your life following the words of one single quote, what would it be?
I would say I love this quote. It's called "More is you say more is lost by indecision than decision."
Right.
And I forgot who wrote it, but I think people just need to act a bit more and like follow their gut and go for something. And oftentimes it's not as hard as you think to go back and change it off that. But I think ultimately you want to be moving forward and falling
Mm,
forward in a way and iterating off of that and learning, because ultimately if you're not making those decisions, you're just sitting there and nothing will change and you won't grow. And so I think it's always better to just be moving forward and making those decisions.
yeah, I love that. I love the bias to action. And the next one might be a little bit similar, but if you could reach everyone in the world for 30 seconds, what would you say?
Yeah, honestly, I think just put yourself in the situation first, and whether that's career or anything, just put yourself there and don't think you can't do it. And just even if you don't have all the skills, just I think there's something so valuable with learning and learning on the job and kind of building that experience from scratch. Like, it's like people's, like, your brain is just so, it can take quite a lot and you can learn so quickly.
Mm,
And I think, yeah, similar to what I said before, it's just, it's better to do something and go in the direction you want to go in, even if it's out of your comfort zone or your skill sets are not fully up to it yet. I think there's something so valuable in, that's where you grow, is when you're off the edge just a little bit.
yeah, awesome,
Yeah.
awesome. So the final question is actually from last week's guest. If you could say anything to your younger self, what would that be? And this is by Isaac Pierce.
I would say anything to my younger self. I would tell myself to just stick with it and trusting yourself a bit. I think there are a lot of times where I would get stressed out about some random situation, like generally around like work or something like that. I think there was a lot of time where I was quite intimidated, like working with people that were so much older than me and working on
Mm.
these problems, which was just like way I never had experienced it or anything like that. It was just like, just yeah, like I would just say stick with it and listen and like learn from people around you and just absorb everything. I think there's
Yeah.
something so valuable in that.
Yeah, awesome. So for the next guest, what would you like me to ask them?
Oh, I think what does the ultimate kind of success mean to you? Like, what form does that take? Is it career? Is it like friends, or like kind
Mm.
of what shape and form?
Yeah. All right. I love that. I'll ask them that one, and I'll keep you updated with it as well. But yeah,
Awesome.
final thing, is there anywhere you want to direct audiences how to find Refract or how to connect with yourself?
Yeah, I think just we've got a new website coming up in a few weeks' time, and that should be really good. That's at refract.studio. Also, just like connect with me on LinkedIn. Just type in my name and yeah, shoot a connection request and just pop in and say hi. And yeah, we're also at Wynyard and Fishburners, so we've got a few desks there. So always stoked to chat as well.
Yeah, awesome. I'll put all of that in the show notes. And yeah, Angus, thank you so much. It was such a fun chat.
Yeah, no, awesome. Thanks for having me.